and welcome to this series of sessions where we are exploring what a successful transition to digital assessment looks like. My name is Shaun Crowley. I'm the Director of International Business Development for AQA Global Assessment Services. I'm joined in the studio by Ben Rockcliffe, who is Director of UK Business Development for AQA Global Assessment Services, and Gemma O'Brien, who is National Programme Manager for AlphaPlus, which is AQA's consultancy and projects unit. We're also joined today by a panel of experts from AQA Education, AlphaPlus and Inspera Assessment. Today we're going to be talking about infrastructure, as in the technical and operational things that need to be in place for a successful transition to digital assessments. So let's kick off, Ben, with the first question for you. What practical things need to be considered for schools to be able to offer digital exams?
Well, this is quite a technical area, Shaun, and I'm sure that some of the panel are going to be able to pick up on a lot of the detail, but I'd start with two kind of key principles to begin with. The first one is flexibility. Schools, there are lots of them around the country or any jurisdiction where you're offering an assessment, and they'll all have their own different approach to infrastructure, their own different capabilities, and you want to build in as much flexibility as possible in terms of your assessment approach. So you'll want to make sure that your assessment platform is as compatible with as many different operating systems as possible, as many different devices as possible, and draws on IT and that has the low system requirements in terms of broadband as possible. The second thing is establishing a clear minimum baseline in terms of what is required for schools operating the assessment. So they need to be really clear on the minimum level of connectivity speed for internet, the minimum operating requirements that they're going to need for their IT systems as well. Once you've got that baseline really clearly established, you can communicate that to schools, they know what they need to put in place, and then they can be ready to operate the assessments.
Thanks, Ben. So, there's lots of practical things. Space, availability of electrical sockets, for example, in schools, and internet bandwidth. Gemma, I'll just turn to you. Have you got any other thoughts on what considerations need to be in place when it comes to infrastructure?
Well, I suppose I would emphasise the need to think differently to the delivery of traditional paper and pencil or pen-based tests. And it's important to recognise that actually the physical requirements for the delivery of digital assessment may in fact be quite different. So it could be the case that you may be able to deliver tests or assessments in a classroom environment, particularly if you're taking an adaptive assessment approach. It's absolutely the case that you could have two learners who are sat next to each other, and the security considerations that would need to be in place for a traditional assessment wouldn't be relevant, because it's not necessarily the case that they would have the same items for two children who are sat next to each other. So that kind of cheating and copying is just not a consideration.
Thanks, Gemma. Ben Rockcliffe, just turning to you now. What considerations are there, particularly around procurement of suppliers when it comes to digital assessments?
Well, I think it goes back to the purpose of the assessment and really thinking about the baseline capabilities that you need for that particular assessment. You may want to deliver certain item types. You may require a specific type of reporting. So I'd suggest that you first of all establish very clearly what your requirements are for the assessment, and then go out and search around for the different assessment platforms that are out there and look for the one that's the best fit. There's a range of different platforms that, for instance, we work regularly with Surpass, there's Inspera who are on our panel today as well. And all of those systems are really great, but they have slightly different functionalities, and there'll be one that is the best fit for whatever your assessment is.
Thanks, Ben. I'm going to ask some of our panellists now to contribute to this. So starting with Simon Trevors from Inspera Assessment. Simon, hi. What do you think we need to think about in terms of general infrastructure for preparing for digital assessments?
When you're looking at the infrastructure implications, particularly at a national level for delivering high-stakes digital assessments, you've got to think about how schools, how your test centres are going to prepare for the delivery of those assessments. So one of the things that we recommend is familiarising the students themselves with the test delivery platform. Student familiarity really helps with the delivery of those high-stakes assessments. But then from a centre point of view or school point of view, thinking about the bandwidth that's available in those centres, how are those administrators in the centres going to manage the download of the test content if you're doing that in advance, for example? Or does the school or centre have enough bandwidth to be able to cope with all of the test takers starting the test and downloading the content at the same time. One of the advantages of a good digital assessment platform is that it should be resilient to poor internet connectivity. What's absolutely critical to success of any digital assessment program is ensuring that when the test takers or students start their assessment, they can get all the way to the end without interruption. That means that if the school or centre's internet connection fails partway through the assessment, that digital platform needs to be able to keep running. Because what you don't want is students unsettled by a pop-up message telling them that they've got no internet connectivity or that they can't navigate to the next question. So there's lots of things that you can achieve with digital assessment. You can automatically record student attendance, for example. You can automatically record incidents of potential malpractice during the exam delivery using the online tool for the proctors or the invigilators in the centre to be able to record those incidents.
So we're going to go now to Sophie Emmertson from Inspera Assessment. Sophie, hi. What else do we need to consider, particularly in terms of costs and procurement when it comes to looking at digital assessments?
When it comes to, devices in schools, well, one of the principles, of course, around fairness is that you have to make sure that every school, every district can afford, within the budgets that they might be allowed by governments to go and procure systems, that schools can then afford to actually procure the number of devices that is required to conduct successfully a national, let's say, a large-scale national test on screen. So having tools and software that can support a number of different devices, including, the less cost-intense devices such as Chromebooks and iPads, tablets, that's been really a guiding principle across at least Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. You have to be able to procure software that doesn't require a very, very cost-intensive setup by the schools to be able to conduct these assessments.
I'd like to bring in Adam Foley now from AQA Education. Adam, hi. What are the infrastructure challenges, and do you need to be pragmatic in the solutions that we use? Give us some examples.
I've been on the road quite a lot, and I've met with many schools who are tackling these challenges in lots of different ways. And they're very creative in the way that they're dealing with these problems. There was one institution that I went to see who were delivering training in a listed building, so they weren't able to make changes to the structure itself. So no candidate was able to bring a laptop and plug it in. They had to work on their own battery within the environment. And the creative solution they came up with was purchasing little batteries that could be put on the candidate's desk in the event of their laptops failing. And when I asked them, well, how heavily utilized are they? And they said, well, in a classroom of sort of 30 or 40 kids who are doing their exam, maybe 3 or 4 kids would need access to that. So it's not something that needs to be available for every candidate, but there do have to be some guiding principles that sit around it. So they ask all of their students to charge up their devices overnight and to test them. And they need to test them by watching a 3-hour movie on Wi-Fi. And if the candidate can watch the entire movie without needing to plug it in, then the device is probably sufficient to run the exam that they want to deliver. But they've got that fallback. They've got those batteries which can be delivered and put in place for the candidate to make sure that they've got that concurrency and ability to deliver. But there are other opportunities too. Some schools have really jumped into the opportunity of delivering digital exams, and they take certain areas of their campus, of their site, and dedicate it to digital exams for a period of time. So one school that I went to see took their sports hall and set it up to be able to deliver digital exams for up to 250 students at a time in that environment and in that space.
Some good practical advice there. A core part of the infrastructure discussion really is around security. Gemma, what considerations are there around security when it comes to digital assessment?
Well, security is a really important aspect of fairness when it comes to assessment. The considerations for, a formative quiz that tests understanding at the end of a block of teaching are going to be very different, for example, compared to a summative assessment where the results will be used to make decisions about things like selection to university or entrance to a profession or something like that.
obviously more potential for cheating in those types of scenarios.
Yeah, where the stakes are higher, the security will need to be higher, I think is a good kind of maxim to think about in relation to digital assessment.
Okay, thanks, Gemma. Let's turn to Simon Trevors now from Inspera Assessment. Simon, is security an important part of your infrastructure?
Security is absolutely critical to successful exam delivery. And when we talk about security, we really are talking about integrity. And integrity means several things. It means ensuring that the questions are valid and fair and authored correctly to be able to evaluate skills and knowledge in the right way. It's about ensuring that on the day of the assessment, that students or test takers are not able to undertake malpractice, for example. So having an exam delivery environment that's invigilated or remotely proctored if the test taker is sat at home, allied to the ability to lock down the device that the test taker is using for their assessment or for their exam. That lockdown capability ensures that the test taker can't have multiple screens plugged in or multiple keyboards with somebody typing for them in a different room, for example. The ability to record activity that's taking place on the device and link that to events taking place during the assessment. Also with security comes proctoring or invigilation capabilities. So for the invigilator, being able to record an event that is time logged to the time that that event took place for that particular test taker or student, having that kind of data helps with enhancing security later. The other benefit of a lockdown digital delivery environment, of course, is that it also helps with protection of content. Many awarding organisations are worried about their assessment content being leaked on the internet. Now, that could happen with a traditional pen and paper assessment where somebody takes a photo of the exam paper so that those questions can be published on the internet. In many ways, it's actually more secure delivering a digital locked down assessment. So there's lots of opportunities to enhance security with digital assessment compared to what you might have with paper.
Thank you, Simon. Really interesting. Lots to take in there around security, around the systems that you're using. I'd just like to turn to you, Gemma. Is there anything else around outside of the system that we need to think about from a security perspective?
I suppose another point to consider are the security risks associated with the delivery and transport of paper-based assessments. If you've got a digital kind of content authoring solution in place like GradeMaker, and you have a digital assessment platform to then deliver the assessment, that reduces the risks involved in getting the exam scripts or the papers from point A to point B. So yeah, that would be another consideration on the kind of pre-test security side.
And I guess the same is true for marking, right? So having an electronic system for marking the final, what we would call scripts in the old world, but
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. By having that kind of information just available within the system for markers to then make judgments about, it does remove some of those kind of external logistical hurdles, shall we say, about getting materials from point A, where the content has been authored, point B, where the learners are taking the assessment, to point C, where the marker is then carrying out their judgments.
Thanks, Gemma. Just a final word from you then, Ben. Where do we start with all of this when we're thinking about security? What are the main takeaways for you, from your perspective?
I think it goes back to Gemma's point about calibrating the approach to the level of stakes within the particular assessment. An assessment is a series of trade-offs, balancing, juggling demands in terms of content, security, and other factors as well. So, you know, Simon mentioned a whole range of different security factors that could be put in place, but if you put all of those in place, it may have cost implications in terms of adding all of those different features in. And it also might have implications in terms of the level of demand that's placed on the ICT systems as well. So you want to make sure that the level of security, the level of solution that you put in place is maximised to whatever the level of security that's required. So clearly, if it's a high stakes assessment that's giving somebody access into a particular profession, the levels of security are going to be higher than if it was for a formative assessment that is just being used in classrooms.
Thanks, Ben. So let's hear again from our panel, our virtual panel. Sophie, is good digital infrastructure just for digital assessments, or is it also about upskilling students with digital literacy, for example?
At least in Scandinavia, we've seen that this kind of investment that governments have then put into infrastructure around schools has not just been focused on, of course, the assessment. It's been part of a major uplift of digital upskilling across all of the schools. So once you put that infrastructure in place into schools, schools can use digital for all sorts of purposes in their learning and teaching. And that's essentially what many of these governments are looking for. It's not just doing a national test, of course, online. It's about making schools ready for what they say is the 21st century skills, of which digital is such a large part.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, the point there that I would maybe say is that it works the other way around as well, doesn't it? So if you're investing in the digital infrastructure to improve digital skills and literacy, then you've also got the opportunity to digitise your assessments as well. Adam Foley from AQA, what's your take on this?
There is a risk when we talk about digital exams that we think about the exam as a point in time, the endpoint assessment. But the reality is, if we want our young people and our students to be fully proficient with digital skills, we're talking about embedding digital fundamentals throughout the whole of their learning journey. It's about making sure that not only is this embedded in the pedagogy, that it's part of the delivery so candidates know what to expect, but then it's about embedding tools like formative and diagnostic assessment along the way as well, so that by the time they're in the position of sitting their final endpoint assessment, they're very comfortable with the environment. They know exactly what's expected of them, and they know exactly how to interact and get the best out of the device. Because ultimately, the last thing we want to do is for candidates to sit in front of the machine and be tripped up by challenges with using the equipment. This is all about really allowing them to show their capability and their skills, so they have to be completely comfortable using the device.
Thanks, Adam. Just turning to the studio guests, what's your take on this, in terms of the potential for improving digital infrastructure to upskill students in digital literacy? Do either of you have a comment? Do you want to come in?
I think that Sophie and Adam raised really good points about this being part of an overall strategy, but it's important to reference as well that those things aren't going to happen independently of each other. It doesn't necessarily follow that you introduce a digital assessment and people's skills will improve automatically. It has to be, as Sophie and Adam said, that there is a strategy around the teaching and learning that precedes that, and then the digital assessment works as well. So it needs to be part of an overall package and an overall strategy, and that's the way things are going to work best.
Thanks, Ben.
I think Adam raises some really good points about the need for familiarisation and how learners need to be kind of comfortable with the kind of digital system and technology and devices that they'll be asked to use in the assessment. But Sophie's point, I think, is really powerful about the need for a wider alignment within the curriculum and digital education initiatives more broadly. As Ben says, we can't kind of just introduce the technology and assume that digital literacy will follow. It needs to be part of a kind of coordinated strategy across the education system and wider curriculum as well.
Thank you. Well, lots to talk about on this subject, but we're out of time. So thank you very much to our panel virtually and here in the studio for this session, and we'll see you next time.